I'm Leann Keeler. This is my friend Jessica Cox.
Hi, guys.
She's a school psychologist here in Clovis Unified and with our preschool behavioral consultation team. Amazing. And I'm Leann. I run the Clovis Unified Family Resource Center. So before we get started, let's go ahead and do a little bit of housekeeping. We're in webinar format, so that's going to help limit distractions. Your mics are muted. If you have questions, you'll see on the top bar, there is a Q&A feature. If you could please use that, that would be really helpful because that will allow us to keep track of your questions in one place and make sure those get answered at the end. This webinar is being recorded and you will get a link in the next day or two with that recording, but it'll also be on the Clovis Unified Family Resource YouTube channel, so you can access that at your convenience at any time. If you need closed captioning, that is an option as well. You're going to go at the very top of the bar, you'll see those three eclipse buttons, the three little dots. You click on that, and then there's a button that says language and speech. You click on that, and then there's a button that says closed captioning, and so you can enable that if you need that feature. At the end, there will be a survey to fill out. Please, this is so important. Your input really matters to me. It helps drive Family Resource Center trainings and making sure that they're meeting your needs. Again, you'll receive an email from me in the next couple of days that has the link and the handouts to the recording, all of the resources from tonight. All right, let me tell you just briefly about the Family Resource Center. So I'm housed with our district's birth to 3 early intervention program called City Kids, but I serve the whole district, birth to 22. I'm helping families navigate when they have concerns about their child's development, special education, understanding their parent rights. I would encourage you to follow the Family Resource Center on social media because I share not only resources that I have for families, but what my community partners are doing as well. And so that is an opportunity for you to stay up to date. And the agenda for today. So we're going to talk, we're going to talk about, information on effective parenting practices. My friend and expert Jessica is going to touch on that. We're also going to talk about child development and being ready for school. And we're going to discuss behavior strategies. Down there on the bottom, you'll see the link to the handouts. Again, don't worry about having to copy that down. You will get that in an email from me. But if you wanted to access them right now, you can do that as well. Okay, so we're going to kick off with parenting, and I'm going to just kick us off a little bit with a big overview of all these tips and strategies we're sharing. Keep in mind too that every family is unique, and what's important to your family may not be important to another family, right? Maybe you're a single parent. Maybe your child has a disability. Maybe you're new to this area or even new to the country. There are lots of different things that can make a family unique and what your priorities are. And so, we acknowledge that. Okay. That is not the button I want to hit. All right, Jessica, I'm going to turn it over to you, and you can help us understand what positive parenting is.
Yes. So there's so many different aspects in positive parenting, but we just wanted to focus on a couple today for you to have a couple takeaways from the webinar. So really what we're going to dive in today is really looking at what can we do that we can control within our family and our family unit as far as our kiddos and their behavior and helping them with their overall development. Also, we're going to look at what are maybe some tips that we can do that can help our kids be prepared for future success, whether that's going to preschool or going to a play date, whatever that looks like for you. Maybe Thanksgiving's coming up, the next family function. What can we do to help our kids be successful in all areas? And also knowing that even though that we're being positive and really looking at things through that lens, it doesn't mean that we are going to be not giving our kids any consequences, or that there's not going to be, we're not going to hold them accountable for their behavior. We still will do those things, but we're going to be talking about what are the positive things that we can do to support them through that.
I think that's such an important message that you touched on, because I hear that from families sometimes that, they just want to be positive. In special education, we think of strength-based, right? Looking at things through a positive lens, but that certainly does not mean that that doesn't mean you're not giving your child structure and as you said, consequences. Yeah. So I appreciate that you mentioned that.
Yeah, and a lot of times, the word consequence can seem harsh too, but really it is just setting boundaries so that we're shaping the behavior that we want to see our kids do in our home versus the ones we don't want to see all the time.
Right. Well, and it's important too, as you were talking about, one of the things that we'll touch on is school readiness, right? And obviously being, at home is very different than being in a school setting.
Yeah.
But, if a child doesn't understand, what it is to be told no, or that waiting, all those sort of things, that can be it's really hard on them then to go into a setting, right, whether that's childcare or even at the park, like you said, and those interactions, if they haven't understood what limits are.
Right. Yep. And some of the things that we'll focus on today too will be, we're going to talk about different strategies that we can have as parents of how we can stay calm and thoughtful through very stressful, heightened situations with our kids. Some different ideas about connecting with your child, which also connects to that school readiness. Encouraging the behaviors that we want to see from them. We're going to talk about how we can point those out in a positive way. And like I said, setting those boundaries and the clear limits for them. They need the structure and the schedule just as much as we do.
My goodness, do I need a schedule?
I know, me too.
I can't function without it.
Okay, so when we are looking at behavior, one of the main things that we always have to take into consideration is what can we as the adult in the situation control. That is really where we want to keep our focus. It's really easy to get caught up in everything that's going on around us, especially if you're not in your home and you're going, working through a behavior, you're somewhere outside of your home in the community, but even within our own home. So really we want to focus on our own behavior. So how am I reacting? How am I keeping myself calm and under control in this stressful situation? We can also control how other family members, to a point, are interacting with our kids. I have 3 sons and I try to control some of that interaction, but then, brothers are brothers. So they're going to just do things sometimes. So we understand that. And then really just having, your go-to strategies that you've learned over time that really work for your kiddos. And if you have more than one kid, there is a good chance that what works for one is not going to work for the other. So then there's that other part. So your toolbox as a parent has to be pretty full, and we know that can be stressful.
Oh, you're so right. I mean, it really, our children's own personalities feed so much into what works for them and what doesn't work for them.
Okay, can we just check with everyone? So just remembering, how our kiddos, and we're going to talk about how our kiddos can push our buttons in a little bit, but when they do, because they know all of our children know exactly what are our hot buttons that we'll be talking about. And that is what is going to make us want to react in a way that's probably not so helpful. So really the hardest thing to focus on, I think, as a parent, is the more out of control or maybe the harder the situation is with your child, the more self-control us as the adults are really having to like show and be prepared to be there to work through that situation. And that can be really, really hard. So just some things that are recommended that help us, take care of ourselves so that we can stay calm and help support our kiddos are, not only thinking about what are some things in the moment that you can do to calm yourself. So, if you have to take your deep breaths, like while you're sitting there with your child that's having the tantrum on the floor, if you need to distance yourself a little bit where you still have your eye on them, but you're not right there, to give you both a moment. If you, need to maybe tap out, if you have, somebody else at home or somebody else around, if, you are really struggling, maybe asking, like, Aunt Leann, can you come? Like, we're just not getting through this together. Like, come in and do this. And, then really what's going to help you be able to calm yourself down and then remain more calm for each incident that's coming up is taking time to look back and really reflect on, okay, what just happened? Was there anything that happened before that maybe we could have done a little differently? Like, did I, like maybe my kiddo really needs a little bit more of a warning before we transition, to the car to go do something, or even from, time to stop watching TV to go to bed. Like, what does that look like? What could I have done to make that look a little bit more successful? Could I have set a timer? Could I have given them, a couple verbal warnings? Like, we have 3 more minutes left, 2 more minutes left. Do I need, does my child need even more support than that, where they maybe would need pictures to let them know, okay, first we're going to do this, then we're going to go do that. So just looking back of what could we have done maybe a little differently before, during, and then after, did we work through the issue okay? And then how did I respond to that? And just really thinking about that process so that every time the next thing goes more smoothly when we do that. And then really, when both of you are de-escalated and you're both in a calm state, really taking time to go back and reconnect with your child to let them know, they know that we're always going to be there for them, right? But really going out of our way to make sure that we reconnect with them. If they're able to have a conversation with you about what happened, then I encourage that. If they're not, maybe just, hugging them, holding them, looking at a book with them, even like, playing alongside of them, just to let them know, like, we're both okay. Like, that was hard, but just letting them know that we're going to reset and try again.
Jessica, one of the things that I think is so important about this side is when you talk about, remember how children can push our buttons, right?
Yes.
And I think just like how we talked about knowing our unique child and what works and doesn't work for them, that's important to know for ourselves as well, because what pushes my buttons, may not even bother you at all.
Right.
Also, preparing ourselves ahead of time. Like, if going to the grocery store, X, Y, and Z is likely going to happen, right? Having that plan ahead of time of how you plan on reacting.
Yeah.
I can remember sometimes going, to the grocery store was hard, right? With, multiple children and needs and all of that. And knowing that front loading them, and we'll get into this more with tips, but, front loading them, what to expect. And then myself, how much that helped me, knowing ahead of time that if this happens, this is what I'm going to do.
Yep.
You know, I'm going to give that one for our family was I'm going to give that, you know, warning. And then if that happens again, we're leaving the cart and we're walking out. You know, we'll have to come shopping again later because, you know, this is not acceptable behavior. And again, I mean, each family's unique, but for myself, just knowing ahead of time when they do that, I'm gonna lose it, right? And so I need to have a plan of how I'm going to respond. And I can't tell you how much peace that gave me, right? It's because you know, I know what I'm gonna do. This is, you know, these are the steps that we're gonna take.
Yep.
So, tips for supporting behavior.
Yeah.
Oh, Jessica, we need this.
Okay, so here's where we're really going to talk about those behaviors that push your buttons. So just in your head, like really think about, you know, what are, you know, some things that really push your buttons? Like what is one thing that you really like, you know, is it screaming? Is it throwing? Is it, you know, you name it.
Right. I know for me, and it's okay that I don't think it's wrong that it pushes your button, right? Again, that kind of goes back to the first slide of what our expectations and what our values are, right? So like in our house, being disrespectful was a big button for me. Like, oh no, you're not going to talk to your mommy or your daddy like that. You know, and so, which that's okay to have that expectation, right? But I also knew I had to have a plan ahead of time of what I was going to do if that happened, so that we're not reacting, right? It's a planned response.
And really like knowing how these behaviors make you feel. And then really knowing like what we're going to go into next is we've talked about like what is your problem statement for that. So if for mine, a behavior that pushes my button is if it's whining, then you know that behavior makes me feel frustrated because I feel like you know my child is not communicating with me really in a way to get their needs met. They're just whining and I don't know what they want. So that can be frustrating. And so in my mind, I could be thinking as my problem statement, like, you know, this kid just whines all the time. Why won't he just tell me what he wants? You know, that would be, you know, where I could go with that. So we're going to talk about like, what can we do to help us stay calm when we have those thoughts? So this is a process that's called reframing. And so with the things when our kids push our hot buttons, if we can look at our problem statement that we would have about that, and if you are able to reframe it, whether you say it to somebody else, you say it to yourself, you say it to your kid. And the thing that I love about this strategy is the reframe doesn't even have to be true. It could just be something to get you not to flip your lid. So it could be humorous. It could be, you know, not humorous. But so just some of the examples are our problem statement. The one that we have here as the example is just, I can't handle this anymore. And then if we wanted to reframe that, we could say, I love them, but parenting is hard and I need to ask for support. Another example of a problem statement is she ruins everything. This is going to be the worst day ever. And we can reframe that. Having her is going to be a wonderful opportunity to enhance my parenting toolbox. So
we might need to practice that one.
But
yeah, I see where you're going.
Yes, and I think there's another one on the next one.
Okay.
Just other examples, you know, my child is so difficult, he will never change. And the way that we could reframe that is my child is trying to find where the limits are and I can help him learn appropriate behavior. Another one, you know, I can never get through anything because of her. I'm tired of dealing with her running around constantly, when really she just really likes to move as she learns. You know, so really those things, even, you know, that are happening around the house where that might make you, maybe you've had like a really long day and the last thing you want to do is, you know, come walk through the kitchen and see that your trash is like overflowing, you know, right? And you have to be the one to take it out. And that could be a point for me, a hot button for me, you know, where I would have to reframe to, you know, maybe my, you know, oh, my boys really like it when I come and ask them to empty the trash can, you know, just things where you can like reframe it so that you're not flipping your lid and getting upset, but still dealing with it. It's just a different way to look at some of those really difficult behaviors and reframing it to what are they trying to communicate with us? Like what, you know, their intention may not be what our problem statement is in our head. And it really does help you go from flipping your lid back down to calming down pretty instantly. So I highly suggest that you try it.
Right. So this is like an internal thing we're doing, or even maybe verbalizing it to ourselves, but it's just a way to, in that moment, instead of having, like you said, those kind of big, this is so awful, it's never going to get better.
Yeah.
It's coming up with something that you can reference and be like, no, it's going to be okay.
Yes. And even if they're like happy behaviors, you know, sometimes our kids just get overexcited and they scream or they do things that are really loud. And, you know, maybe you walk in the room and your child, you have a nonverbal child, but they're so excited to see you, they scream. And you're just like, oh, you're so excited to see me today, you know, like, so just, you know, if those things trigger you, just reframing those things really helps calm your body down.
Great.
So this just goes over that, like why we reframe, because the way that we're feeling affects the way that we're thinking about a situation. And we could put assumptions on a situation or a behavior that really are not the intention of the child. And so the way we think affects the way that we act and react to those. And then the way we react really affects our relationship with our kids. So if we are reacting when our lid is flipped, we are not going to be teaching the appropriate behavior we want. We're, you know, we are not going to be keeping that trusting, loving relationship with our kids. It is going to affect that.
Right. And, you know, I love that you give this visual of the why behind it, because really this is true for all our relationships, right?
Yes. You could do it at work. You could do it with your spouse.
You
could do it with your friends.
At the grocery store counter last night when I'm trying to not flip my lid, right? And going, but look, this is what you charged me, and this is what I was supposed to pay per your ad. Okay.
You were really trying to make sure that my mouse skills were on point tonight.
Right. And again, but you know, and how our assumptions, right? In even if someone cuts you off in traffic, right? Your mind automatically goes to, oh, they're just a jerk. They're inconsiderate. Our minds don't go to, you know what? They could have a loved one in the hospital and they are so distracted just trying to get there to them. Or maybe they just got a diagnosis of, you know, some horrible illness and they're just not thinking clearly and didn't even bother to check their mirror. That's not where our mind goes. No. Our mind goes there, inconsiderate jerk, right? And so this kind of goes along that same thinking is just reframing it that there could be another reason, number one. And number two, what we can control, as Jessica said, is ourselves, right? In that moment. And how can we reframe it to get ourselves a little de-escalated, right? So then we can model that to our kiddos. Yeah, great job, Jessica.
Thank you. This just goes over what we already said.
Okay. Look at us.
I must not have decided which one I wanted.
Right.
We kind of touched base on this already too, and it really is just like Leann had said, with having your plan, what you're really going to do is having your expectations already spelled out to your kiddo in advance. As much as, I assume my kids can read my mind all the time. I learned that they cannot, but sometimes I still forget that. And really letting them know what I expect of them, what I want them to do. And then making sure that I follow through with what I have already asked them to do, or when maybe if it is before we're leaving the house to go somewhere and we've gone over the expectations, and then we're going over them again in the car, then we're going over them again before we get out of the car, just knowing that whatever I have stated is what I'm going to have to follow through with if something does happen. So if we are, at the park and we're playing, and, my expectation is for you to stay in the playground area, and if I have a kid that likes to take off running, knowing what are my expectations of that, and then, what is the follow through going to be for my kiddo that is a runner? Are they going to have to come stand by me for a couple minutes, and then I'd let them have another chance, and then how many times are we doing that before, park just needs to be all done. So really just having those expectations put in place, whether it's you have them with a picture schedule or you go over them verbally, whatever works best for your child. Even for me, and thinking about going to new places, different places that I've never been before, I have to remember, like, even I am scanning the room for, like, where are the signs? Like, what are the expectations when we go in here? Can I not have my cell phone on? Can I have it on? Do I have to do this? So I feel like even as adults, we're constantly looking for those expectations to guide us in the environment that we're in currently. It might be a waiting room at a hospital, or it might be, you are going to a museum or something different like that. So we still need those as adults. So just remembering that our kids still need to have those reminders. And, when you're doing them consistently, they really, really do pick up on them, and they're able to help you talk through them. You're able to ask those open-ended questions like, okay, when we get to the line at the grocery store, we are, and then they're able to finish it for you because they understand what the expectation is for that.
And what I think is so important about you hitting on that too, is that that's true no matter what your child's age, no matter what their ability or disability is. They're your child, and obviously what's developmentally appropriate, what's appropriate for their abilities, and age, and for your family expectations, but really making sure they understand that, right? Because it's going to keep changing over time, what those expectations are. And I agree with you. Sometimes we just think they know. Like, I've taught you this. I clearly remember telling my teenage kids, I know I taught you this when you were 4. Why am I reminding you of this now?
Yeah.
But that's parenting, right? I mean, you're always kind of meeting them where they're at, and sometimes you got to reteach it.
Sometimes it's even something like as simple as listening to you read a story. Sometimes we assume that our kids know, like that, this is what the expectation is when you're looking through a book with them and asking them questions, and they don't a lot of times. So there's just so many things.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's hard. It's hard to not to, we as parents, we have so much compassion for our children if there are, certain circumstances. Maybe you've gone through a divorce and they're struggling with that, or maybe they have a disability, and it's hard as parents to not be like, oh, but they have this, I don't want to make it harder. But again, really, these expectations, right? That's that foundation for getting them through life. That there are always going to be expectations. And so I appreciate you touching on that, Jessica.
Yeah. Another tip that we highly recommend to our parents that helps us stay calm as well is focusing on what we can tell our kids to do instead of just focusing on when we're giving them feedback about things, pointing out like the wrong things or what they should not be doing. And that doesn't mean we don't ever tell our kids no or don't or stop. We still have to let them know that those things are not okay. But really, when we want to get the behavior that we want, or we want them to follow through with the expectation, it really is just completely stating what you expect them to do. So if you expect them to be using their walking feet, if you expect them to be using gentle hands, and then the minute they're doing that, as soon as they're having walking feet instead of running, in the library, then we're going to let them know, like, you are using your walking feet. You're being so safe, letting them know and really pouring into them that they're having, that's the positive feedback they're going to get, because then they know, oh, this is the expectation. So if we're just saying all the time, don't run, don't jump, don't do this, don't do that, and we're never letting them know what we expect them to do, there's nothing for them to replace that with. So in their mind, like, okay, well, I can't run. What else can I do? I enjoy running, so I'll just keep doing that. So unless we give them of what they can do instead, we can't just assume that they're going to know that. So this is a handout that is in the link. If you guys want to review it, it breaks down a bunch of different scenarios, and then what you can do to list the expectations, and then how you can follow up with positive feedback for your kiddos.
And it's hard in the moment, to find that time to catch them being good, right? It's so much easier. I remember very well feeling like, but everything's quiet, like things are going well. I don't want to poke the bear. I don't want to. Yes. Right? But it really is investing that time, that extra time to reinforce, like, no, that's it. Good job. One of the things though too that I wanted to point out with this is that it can be hard too when there are different expectations in different settings, right? And so that kind of goes back to helping children know what to expect. That it may be perfectly okay to have one, set of expectations at home, but that may not be your expectation, when you're out in public. Also, the positive feedback. Do you think it's better to just, like, are we just giving a general good job, or do you think we really need to take time to be specific about what they're doing?
Yeah, you are so right. We really need to take time to be specific on the feedback that we're giving them, because letting our kids know, like, oh, well, good job. A lot of times they're like, they hear the good job, but they don't know what it's for, because maybe they're doing 3 or 4 things correctly, but they aren't knowing which one that we're really focusing on for them. And so it really, truly, you have, to point out the very specific of exactly what did you see them do. So I don't just want to look, because I'm expecting you to sit nicely, which you are. But if I just tell you, good job, Leann, I could be good job for running the webinar, good job, coming to work today, good job sitting. But what I'm really wanting you to know is that I appreciate that you're sitting here. So unless I let you know, that you are sitting, and really pointing that out and giving them that feedback in a positive way. It's not you can't ever say good job, or, a lot of times we're like, we'll start positive feedback with wow, or that's awesome. But like letting them know, like, what got you excited.
So it's being a little more specific than just a good job.
Yep.
And I think we're going to get to this maybe in a few slides too, but
Yes.
do you think that it's helpful, like if you're struggling with several behaviors from a kiddo, should you tackle them all at once? Or is it better to maybe narrow it down on
Yeah.
things that, I mean, if they're really, if they're really causing disruption for you as a family, should you kind of tackle it priority wise? Like,
Yeah, I would say what is, most important to you to
Mhm.
look at, you know, teaching them the appropriate behavior. So
Mhm.
if you have 6 things that, are your hot buttons, well, then what are the first 2 or maybe even 3? But,
Mhm.
really looking at like, okay, well, let's start with these 2. And a lot of times when you really focus on the first 1 or 2 and get those where they're really learning what the behavior expectation is and what behavior they should be engaging in instead, you will often see the ones that don't bother you as much kind of trickle off and
Mhm.
follow in suit, because what you're doing for the ones that really do hit your hot buttons are the most, safety concerns, the
Mhm.
disruptive. Um, they really learn the skills with those behaviors that help them with the other ones.
Oh, good point.
I think I kind of went over that already. So
Um,
just calming strategies.
right, but I think we talked about calming strategies for
Oh,
ourselves. This is for our
for our
kiddos.
kiddos.
Yes.
That's important too.
It is important.
So many strategies that we can help our kiddos regulate their social emotional. A lot of times our kids have big emotions and they have big reactions to maybe situations that aren't that big of a deal to us, but to them they are. So they're letting us know through their behavior that this is really a big deal to them. And what can we do to help them have some different ways to calm their body? There's many ways, one of the things, if your kiddo, your preschooler is in school with in any of our state preschools, or if anybody on here has maybe a TK or a kindergartner, you'll hear us talking frequently about our calming areas in our classrooms. And so that is something that your child is used to utilizing to help regulate themselves when they're upset. I know that we've had a lot of our parents incorporate quiet, calming areas within their house, where it kind of mirrors what they can go and have a quiet place with, um, maybe a blanket or a pillow or a stuffed animal, or even some of the visuals that we have that are a part of this training that you can hang up, where they just have that space to get away, to calm down. But other things you can do with them would be your deep breathing. If you guys can go on a walk, doing different counting activities, that helps de-escalate. Some of our kids just need to be physical, so running in place, jumping jacks, having them, they can push as hard as they can on the floor or the wall. Some of our kids just need to like stomp it out as hard as they can, or some of our kids react really well to like different stretching. But when we're teaching all of these calming activities, whether it's individualized ones or whether you have a calming area or a calming, space for your child, really practicing those things and letting them know that this is what they can do, like when they're not upset. We don't want to be trying to get them to learn these things or utilize them for the first time when they're in the middle of a tantrum. We want to be teaching them during different areas of when they're calm. And it could be we're just playing, and then, we could come up with a scenario and be like, oh, well, if you were upset right now, what is something you could do? And then we practice that with them. A lot of times we pair these activities with visuals. And just knowing that what is going to work to calm your kid down. And some of our kids require strategies that are definitely out of the box, that maybe I wouldn't think works, but it works for one of Leann's kids or vice versa. And so using those as your go-tos when we are working through when our kids are escalated. So having to be unique is not a bad thing. It's, just making sure that you communicate with, if your kid is in school or, going to go play with a friend, like, here's the things that really work for my kiddo if they get upset.
Good advice. Also, I would insert in here as well, use as few words as possible.
Yes.
I cannot tell you how many times I see a parent, with their young child who is escalated, and the parents just don't stop talking. Like, it's like the constant, even if they're doing these strategies, they're using such long explanations, and
they're not hearing us.
They're not hearing.
Yeah.
They are it's just making it worse, right? And so not only are we wanting to be calm, but use as few words as possible.
And that's where the visuals do come in handy, where we could just point to or let them see the visual card, like the one that's on here on this slide, and they can point, to what they're needing at that time. Are you needing a drink of water? Are you needing to go, take a minute by yourself? Are you needing to breathe? Where we're not having to have all those words coming at them, but we can just show them. And when they're ready, they can pick. They're not going to pick most likely right away because they're mad, right? Or they're upset or they're frustrated. But just letting them know, like, I'm here whenever you're ready. Like, let me know, what you want to do, and we can calm down. And just letting them know, like, I will wait. I'll wait till you're ready, and meeting them where they're at in that moment.
Okay, so we're going to talk about, pivot. We're talking about things we can control as the adults, right? Screen time. So I'm just going to preface this that we know that this is a different world we are living in now, and screen time is here. So we just want to talk about ways that it impacts our children, though, and that, just to remind you, it is something that we do have control over as parents. I'm often amazed that even like young children, 14 months old, and parents will be like, oh yeah, they know how to get past my password and get onto YouTube. I'm like, oh mercy, so technology is here. So this may sound a little basic, but I want to include this because really when we think of screen time, a lot of us 20 years ago, you would automatically just think of a television, right? But now our obviously phones are the number one, right? Source of screen time, but tablets, computers, even electronic toys. It's so interesting seeing toys that will literally do everything for the child, and you're like, oh my goodness, it's not even giving them an opportunity to be creative and be quiet and learn how to play with it themselves, right? But so screen time encompasses all those electronic options. And so, what does the American Academy of Pediatricians recommend? So, 18 months and younger, they're still talking no screens are best, right? That doesn't mean, video chatting with a family member. That's completely different, right? That's that interaction, back and forth conversation. And then this is just sort of the guidelines as they get older. The important thing too, though, is thinking about this in the behavior context. Like you were saying, if you know that your child has a hard time, with pivoting from screen time to maybe bedtime, or from screen time to getting up, think about those. Maybe watching a screen before school, or before you have to head out for the day's event, maybe that's the time that's not a good use of it, because it's going to cause a conflict. And so really using it at times that are, more beneficial.
Yeah, and I like that they point out to really developmentally with those guidelines is pairing the screen time like with us as parents. So
Yes.
if we are going to be watching a show, I know sometimes it's hard for us as parents to sit down for a little bit to watch it with them, but really, because then there still would be that interaction, and they're getting to see us and we're having conversation.
Right.
Or if we're playing it like an educational game on an iPad, but we're doing it together and we're still interacting.
Right.
That piece is crucial to just the solo screen time at such a young age.
And using it, as you said, as an educational moment and as a connecting moment, right?
Yeah.
We all love snuggles. So this is Cash. I love this because honestly, he loves to watch TV. I kid you not. And so everyone is watching television. I love those America's Funniest Home Videos, and the videos of the animals as they're, swatting at the screen because they think it's real.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it is not immune to just two-legged friends. So it adds up quick. Honestly, screens are everywhere. And so even when, as we talk about what we call a media diet, right? And portioning out when we're going to let our kids have access to screens, think about it. It really does add up quick. Even if, maybe you don't allow it, at home except for certain times, what are they getting at childcare? What are they getting at school? What are they getting at their friend's house? Honestly, I included these. You can't even pump gas.
I know,
without a screen, right? And commercials coming at you at the restaurant tables. Yeah, it really is something. One of the things that, and we'll get to this too, but one of the things that I used to do as a young mom, was I had a bag, and I think we'll get to this in the tips, but a bag that I kept in the car that was strictly for going out to, whether it was a restaurant, a doctor's appointment, with fun items that it felt unique and new because they didn't have access to it all the time. But it was a great way to entertain them and to keep them busy while we were waiting. But this, not to be Debbie Downer, but can too much tech be harmful? It is. I mean, they've done lots of studies that too much screen time is detrimental to a child's development, whether it's their gross motor skills, fine motor skills. The communication is huge. I work with a team of amazing speech therapists, and they're always talking about just when children don't have that opportunity to have that back and forth conversation, how that can really affect their social skills, their expressive language. It also, the self-regulation. We're talking about behavior and waiting patiently, attention span. That all factors into when kids have too much screen time.
And I know a lot of times it is easy to, utilize screen time to help pacify time or fill in waiting times. And I feel like, I'm not saying don't ever do that.
Right.
Just be mindful of the times that you are picking and choosing, like, when you really need to rely on that. And thinking about, like, when it comes to waiting, once they get in school, there is a lot of waiting, not a lot of waiting, but there's times where you have to wait, and different times where, you have to be in line, and we don't have screens available for all of the kids to be watching. So really, too, thinking that is something that, removing that from, a lot of those different waiting times is really helping prepare them for school, because they're not going to have that available to pass the time.
Mm-hmm.
What they will have to pass the time is interacting with their friends while they're,
Mm-hmm.
waiting to be called to go line up. Once they're in line, being able to look at their friends and smile and have those interactions. So really thinking about that, as that's a skill that they're going to need to have once they're in school.
Mm-hmm.
And if that's filled with screen time, they are going to be behind in that area and have a hard time waiting.
I know, and you think about common times that it is hard, that temptation, traveling in the car,
Mm-hmm.
right? Road trips. But you think about before that was available, kids did have to entertain themselves, right? They played road games. They, but now it's like, even sitting, like I said, at a restaurant, and you see so often everybody in the family is on a screen, and no one's interacting with each other. And so part of the problem is that if they don't get that chance to practice, right, they're not going to learn how to sit and have dinner as a family, how to interact with each other. And again, it's not just the social skills, but it's that bonding time. They grow up quick. I promise you that.
They do.
Yes.
And even with it makes me think about seeing everyone on the screen at like the restaurant at eating, and you think about translating that to like our cafeteria time.
Mm-hmm.
That is another time where they get to be social with their friends. And if they're used to having that screen in front of them, then that can be another difficult time for them, is mealtime at school.
Great. So alternatives to screen. I think a lot of this is just basic 101, but I can remember for me it was hard rainy days, because we were a park family. I loved taking we would go to different parks, like, to change it up, right? Like, I was always on the hunt for a new park. But just going outside for a walk. If it's raining, take an umbrella. It's okay. They're not going to melt, right? But having a picnic at the park, having a car wash. Honestly, I can remember on rainy days putting all the kids in the bathtub in their bathing suits, and I'd let them finger paint in the bathtub on the tile, and I would get to sit and just enjoy a magazine, maybe while they're entertaining themselves. But again, these things are hard because they do make messes, right? But I'm telling you, there's time to clean it up later. Okay. Honestly, just letting them play is so important to their development. Um, but these are just a few little ideas. Now you could Google 100, I'm sure. Speaking of screens. Oh my goodness. Okay, so but let's be real. We know there are times of the day that you need to get things done. So as Jessica said, think moderation. Um, think of what, throughout the day, when do I really need, maybe it's while you're cooking dinner, right? Like I know that, 5 to 5:30, I'm not going to, be able to function that evening if they don't get this done, if they aren't quiet for a while. And also rotate out toys at home. Too many choices. Being a home visitor, I do home visits, and I I get overwhelmed by the amount of toys. Like, honestly, you think that can be so overwhelming to a child. And so, one of the things that I always recommend is just having maybe one toy box full, right? Or one shelf, whatever it is, one area with toys, and then rotate them out. And it really does keep them feeling new and exciting, and saves money. So, I mentioned this already, keeping a going out bag of activities that are just for when you're out and about. but again, we're thinking moderation. We're thinking of it as a diet. Okay, we know that you're going to do it, right? We know we're going to go through McDonald's sometimes, or we're going through Taco Bell. That's just a fact of our busy lives. But think of it in moderation, right? You don't want to do that for every single meal. And so, setting limits,
Mhm.
clear start and end times, right? And those boundaries. This is really important too. It's content.
Yeah.
Okay. There is a huge difference between something that's educational and just purely entertainment. And that's true for all of us, right? But especially young children, their brains are growing so rapidly and they're learning so much. And you really do want to think about, is it age appropriate and does it support your values? Again, we talk about, um, you know, kiddos at 2 years being able to get on YouTube, right? That's a whole new that's something that young parents nowadays are facing that parents 10 and 20 years ago didn't have to worry about,
Yeah.
is what your kiddos are exposed to. And so just being mindful of all of that and being a good mentor. Again, it amazes me how often sometimes I'll see the parents on the screen and the kids are just sitting there,
Like,
right?
play with me.
Somebody play with me, somebody talk to me. And again, you know, we as adults have gotten a way of just being able to entertain ourselves. I mean, how many of us, you're at a stoplight and the person in the car next to you, right, is on their screen, and you're like, oh mercy.
Yeah.
Just focus on driving your car, okay?
Yeah, I know us as adults, we use it as a time filler
All
all
the
the time.
time.
So it's just natural that our kids want to do the same thing.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
One of the things I wanted to say about the limits, the clear start and end time, I know for me, when my kids were younger, I really had to set a timer, a physical timer,
Hmm.
because it's so easy for time to go by. And I would be
Right.
like, shoot, like we were only going to be on this for, 20 minutes right now.
Hmm.
And now I'm already like, 45, 50 minutes has already gone by. And
Right.
like that, because they're quiet, they're entertained. I just
Hmm.
got laundry, dishes, all this stuff
Right.
done. So I would have to use that timer for myself
Hmm.
to stop whatever I was doing in that moment to go and find a different activity for them
Right.
to move on to.
Yep. Get outside, go play,
Yeah.
whatever it is that, right.
Yeah, so the timer was more for me than them.
I love that. Mom needs a timer.
Yes.
Yep. All right. So more ideas for supporting development.
Yes. Play, 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 play.
Hmm.
Really, the power of play is such an amazing thing. And having our kids have access to, like Leann said, just different toys. And I love the idea of not having them all out at once, but letting them be creative, letting them use their
Hmm.
imagination. And honestly, like I don't know about you, but how many of your kids like would rather play with cardboard boxes
Hmm.
and paper towel rolls than the
Right.
actual
The
toys?
actual, yeah,
So
$100 Lego set.
so I am all about embracing that, letting them build with random things, play with random, let them have sticks and,
Hmm.
dirt and different sand things to play in. And really, it does help them when it comes to their cognitive growth. It definitely helps with their social skills. A lot of people don't think about it as preparing them for literacy and language, but it truly does. And then to physical fitness, so it's
Hmm.
just their overall well-being. And it helps them learn how to build those connections and those relationships with people, which is going to be the foundation for everything for them, is being able to have connections and relationships. And as hard as it is for us to sit down and find time to play with them, even just a little like part of your day, whether it's right before, like that time between dinner and bath, or
Hmm.
maybe it's right after school for you, or maybe you have more time in the morning, like wherever it fits. But And if you have multiple children, just fostering them to be able to do activities together, and letting them take the lead on some of the things. So even if it is like a craft or an art project, and we're going to make a mess, so then we're going to put down a plastic tablecloth that we can
Dollar Tree,
on our whatever surface you can clean up the best, and just giving them an opportunity to be creative with different things. And like I said, it doesn't have to be things you buy. You can get leaves, you can get whatever, and they can be gluing them together or coloring them or painting them, but really having that opportunity to play, build things, make racetracks, just do all of the things, is really gonna be beneficial to them.
So, and one of the things too I want to touch on with that is if that's not your normal yet, right? And maybe they are already using a lot of screen time, it may be a little hard, right? Like any new habit to adjust to, but the more they practice it, the easier it's going to be. The more they're going to entertain themselves, the more they're going to learn to play well, either independently or with others.
Yes.
And so don't give up. Just keep trying.
Okay.
This is still you.
Oh yeah. So just other activities to build into your day to work on having those relationships with your family is our routines. I know that, us as adults, like I have my own routines and how important those are for me, and to have those every day. And yes, I know that some things are going to be different, but even, the days that don't go as planned for me can be difficult. So the same goes for our little ones. Making time in your schedule to connect with your kids. So we've said whether that's just, giving, a quick time and a hug or snuggle time, or singing, playing a game with them, reading a book with them, always making time in your schedule to connect with your kids throughout the day. And like we said, it doesn't have to be anything where you're, sitting for hours. I mean, even just 10, 15 minutes here and there, spread out throughout your day is better than not doing that at all. And then just modeling what you would expect to have be shown back to you from your kids. So modeling all of the respect, the honesty, the kindness.
Right. I, when we were talking a minute ago about making messes, right? Well, I mean, really, short of an infant, right? Any kiddo within their abilities, think about how they can help with that. Chores are so important. I also, as we're talking about behaviors too, I'm often surprised when I talk to families of a young child and they share maybe how, difficult the mornings are. And then I say, well, what's the bedtime routine look like? And they'll like, well, they just go to bed whenever they want to. They usually don't fall asleep till, 10 or 11 o'clock, whatever. And so pivoting back to what Jessica was saying is just having that routine is so important for a kiddo, just to be able to function, right?
And I think it's more too important about keeping the routine of the activities as it is activities and exact time. Like as long as your kid knows, like, okay, my evening is play outside, eat dinner, take a bath, read a story, go to bed. If your times have to be flexible for any reason, maybe you're out of town, maybe you have a family birthday dinner, then they don't know time,
Right.
but they do know that this is the 5 things I'm going to do every time before I go to bed. So I would focus more on the activities, and not so much trying to put that pressure on yourself of, oh my gosh, it's 5 o'clock and I haven't fed them dinner yet. You know, it's okay if it's 5:15, 5:12, whatever it's got to be. But just knowing that they know the sequence of those activities. And then, like Leann said, you know, making sure that we're getting them in bed at a decent time.
Because pro tip, that's also going to be your respite. Okay. Yeah. So
that's your time to
right?
rest and relax.
Yes. And not have to watch Bluey 12 times over. Right. So, all right. So we've talked a little bit about this, but
yeah, just some things to keep in mind. I know we've touched on it throughout the PowerPoint of getting your child prepared for school, and really thinking more about these things versus, you know, we don't expect your preschooler to come to school reading and writing and solving math problems. So take that pressure off yourself.
Yes.
What we really are working on with them is waiting their turn, sharing with a friend. How do I play with another kid? Attending to when an adult is talking to me. You know, being able to attend when there's friends sitting around me. You know, how does that feel? What does that look like? Being able to follow adult directions. So maybe, you know, one thing to really look at is a lot of times we're getting our students in and they can follow a one-step direction. So if we tell them, you know, go get your backpack, they can do that. But if we say, go get your backpack and go find your square on the carpet, they're not able to do that second step. So really, you know, really working on more than just one step with your student or with your child, because once they come to school, they are, you know, going to have to follow more than just one adult direction. And then just their basic self-help skills. And I know as a mom, a lot of these things are just so much easier to do myself, but I'm, you know, not helping my kids out. So they really having them work on toileting and going to the restroom by themselves, getting dressed, being able to pull, you know, pants up, shirts down, eating, their communication, and then also working on cleaning up. So like Leann said, anything that we do, even after dinner, you know, that working on that skill of, you know, oh, if you're helping me clean off the table or if you're helping me clean up the kitchen, it's also a connecting point with us where we're doing it together and we're talking and, you know, having a good time doing it. So a lot of times thinking of those cleanup or those chores is really, you know, at the younger age, we have to do them alongside of our kids anyways. So it really is a connecting point. And they can do it.
They can do it. And really it's that sense of belonging, right? Yeah. We're a family and we all pitch in to, you know, take care of our home and to help each other out.
Even if you didn't make the mess.
Even if you didn't, right?
Even if you didn't dump that bin of toys out. We can all work together to put it back.
That's right, because they are going to get put back. Yes. Yep. Okay. Real quickly, because I know we're over time and I appreciate everyone's patience. But I just want to wrap it up here that, you know, if you're concerned with your child's actual development, like we talk to families all the time that, you know, maybe their child's 3 and still really not talking very well. It can be hard. Sometimes you know, the first step, obviously, you know, speak to your pediatrician. I talk to families who they have spoken to their pediatrician. Maybe their pediatrician, you know, kind of blows it off that, oh, well, they're a boy. You know, they'll catch up later.
Wait till they get to school.
Wait till they get to school, right? There are things you can do. You obviously, once a child is 3 years old, you can reach out to the school that they would be attending and ask to speak to that school, you know, psychologist or speech therapist, and share your concerns and see if that might be an area that needs to be assessed, or they could direct you if it's not necessarily an educational need. You know, they could, you know, direct you into some other ideas, maybe out in the community that might be appropriate. But we just don't want you to feel like it's hard sometimes, especially if it's